This month, Decibel is focusing on criminal justice and reentry, and we wanted to bring in a couple of folks who've been on the front lines of the mental health care aspect of that for many years. So we have Laura Wilson-Slocum, who is with Integral Care, and we have Daniel Smith, who is with the Travis County Sheriff's Office. I really want some insight on what is in place to help people who have served time. But let's go back and begin with, okay, once someone's convicted of a crime, how are their mental health care needs addressed here in Travis County?
Sure.
So starting when a person gets arrested, they come into the Travis County Jail, and we have a team of mental health professionals at Central Booking, and they complete assessments on the individuals and determine if they have a mental health need. Generally, about 20% of those coming in do have a mental health need, and many more have substance use needs. So if they meet the criteria of bipolar, schizoaffective, schizophrenia, we set them up with our psychiatry team, which is actually Integral Care employees. We have a psychiatrist and 4 nurse practitioners that work with us. And then the counselors continue to monitor them throughout the system during their time in jail. And a lot of things are going on at that time. They're going to court, they're talking with their attorneys, and we have 2 special mental health dockets in Travis County. One's for misdemeanors and one's for felonies. And we communicate with the courts about the needs of these individuals. They have attorneys that are trained in mental health issues. The prosecution is also trained in mental health issues, and they take that into consideration when they're looking at the disposition. And then once they've gone through that system and they're ready to re-enter, we work on setting up a plan with them. Generally, most of our people from Travis County Jail are going to go back into the community, but a very small portion will go off to prison, and then they'll re-enter from prison. But when we do the re-entry, we work with Integral Care. We have many of their staff with us in the jail and at the court to help make that transition.
Laura, I think some people don't know how important Integral Care is in our community. First of all, explain what Integral Care does.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for the opportunity to come here and talk today, and just for your interest in this topic. It's really important. I'm really glad you guys are doing a series on this. Yeah. So Integral Care is the mental health authority for Austin Travis County, and they're also the Intellectual and Developmental Disability Authority. And we've been around since 1967, serving people that live with mental illnesses, substance use disorders, and intellectual and developmental disabilities. And ultimately, we just work to improve their lives so that they can contribute their unique gifts to the community. Integral Care as an agency really focuses on trying to prevent unnecessary incarcerations for people that are living with mental illnesses or experiencing a mental health crisis. And we do that in a number of ways. One of the largest ways we do that is working with first responders like the Sheriff's Department, Austin Police Department, Austin Travis County EMS on pre-arrest diversion programs where those first responders recognize a mental health crisis is potentially going on, and then calling out crisis specialists from Integral Care to provide crisis assessment and intervention on scene and try to prevent or present alternatives to incarceration that would be better serving the individual in crisis and ultimately better for our community. However, we recognize that when people do go to jail and they're re-entering the community, that is an extremely difficult time in a person's life. And we want to be available to provide them treatment and supports to help them navigate that very difficult period of their lives so that it can end there. It can be that difficult period of their lives, and then they move on past that and they thrive. So some of the types of treatments and supports that we might provide can include certainly therapy, medications, psychiatric medications, supportive housing services, which is critical when someone is getting out of jail, supportive employment and education services, which tends to be the type of services people who are leaving jail are the most interested in, is achieving gainful employment that's meaningful. Peer support services, where someone who has lived with a mental illness and spent time in jail can talk with that person about their experiences and share what's worked for them. And then integrated primary and mental health care at all of our clinics, which include primary care, mental health treatment, supportive housing and employment, nutrition and wellness services, exercise information, tobacco cessation. So really our approach, we just try to approach the person holistically.
Wrap around services.
Yes.
And it sounds like you two work very closely and kind of in tandem.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you think the most challenges are? I'm sure you'd love to have a bigger staff and more money and those kinds of things. Where are we falling short, and where's the need right now to help these folks, both on the front end, stay out of prison, but if they go to jail or prison, helping them on the outside?
Sure.
I think the biggest challenge for an individual is the need for support. Because if you can imagine, when you leave jail, you're told, don't hang around the same people you've always hung around with. Don't do the same things you've always done. You need to change your thinking. Basically, you need to change your whole lifestyle. And so you're taking away the support system, which may not be the best support system for that person. And we've got to give them a new support system that'll help them make the transition. And that's where integral care comes in, is they provide that person there that can guide them through the process. Because it's not you just walk out of the jail and now you're done. It's something that takes years of change to do. And it's habits that have to change, and thought processes and jobs and all that stuff. So you really need to have someone on the outside that's going to take you through this process and be there with you.
Yeah, I agree with Danny. The substance use needs for people leaving jail, and just really in our community in general, are really something that is lacking in terms of volume and being up to scale. Substance use and misuse is so prevalent with people that spend times in jails and then re-enter the community, that we really need to provide services that target people's needs to recover from substance use and live very productive lives. I would also say that housing remains a really big challenge in our community,
especially if someone has a disability. I mean, we've heard that from several people. It's like if you are in a wheelchair or you have substance abuse issues, it's more difficult if a physical or mental disability to find housing.
Absolutely. We have housing specialists at Integral Care, and in fact, we have a housing specialist that is housed inside Del Valley Jail that try to work with people before they leave the jail on identifying those housing needs. Just the people you were talking about, people that not only live with mental illness and substance use disorders or intellectual and developmental disabilities, but people that live with physical disabilities as well, that make it literally difficult to navigate finding housing. And that is a process that without a housing specialist to help you walk through, it can seem and be insurmountable. I would say another challenge, and I'm interested to hear what the Sheriff's Department says about this, is that when a person is released from jail, it's very difficult to know exactly when that's going to happen. And so oftentimes people are released before they've had an appointment made for an intake with Integral Care.
That could be, because you've got to get them right at that moment.
Yes, absolutely.
Difficult, yeah.
Integral Care even has programs that if we know when someone's leaving, there will be specialists that come out and literally meet them at the exit of the jail and take them to an appointment or serve them in the community at their residence or wherever it is that they're going after jail.
That's really the way it should be, right?
Yes. Community supports whenever possible for any population, but especially people re-entering from a jail, really removes a lot of barriers and impediments to treatment when you bring the service out to them at a location of their choosing in the community, as opposed to asking someone who may have transportation barriers or difficulty navigating all the appointments they have after they've come back into the community. And it sets them up for better chances at success if you bring the services out to them in the environments they're comfortable in.
But again, that takes a lot of manpower.
It does. Yes. I equate it to like being discharged from a hospital. When you're discharged from a hospital, you have all the specialists come in and talk with you. Here's your appointment here. Here's the information you need. Here's the doctor's orders for you. Here's your prescription. All that's taken care of. In a jail, it's so much more difficult because first, we don't know when that person's getting out. They go to court and they could work on a plea deal. They could get time served. It could be dropped. They walk out a few hours later. Right. So trying to find someone housing who came in homeless in that short of a time is near impossible. The other things are like, just your appointments, like Laura was saying, getting your appointments set up, transportation from the jail to a safe place. If you're homeless and you're out at Del Valley and you've got to get back downtown to where the shelters are, which aren't as safe as we would hope them to be, but that in and of itself is a challenge. Sometimes you just have to hitch a ride to make it downtown.
That's right.
So in a perfect world, what would you like to see happen to prevent more people from this revolving door? I mean, I know that the recidivism rate has gotten better, but what are some things we as a community could rally behind and push for that would make fewer people continuing to go back into
We've talked about for a while, but I don't think it's ever really gotten traction, a one-stop shop where for people who are involved in criminal justice can go and know this is a safe space where I'm not going to get arrested for whatever, but I can go seek services. So integral care would be there, you would have transportation there, you'd have the housing people there. A place where there are case managers that can work with them and be the advocate for them. That would be the ideal situation. And then when they're released, we could transport them to that location and they can get set up with services.
Do some communities have that in place that you know of?
Not that I know.
Maybe we should be on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
Austin likes to be innovative.
So when we talk about your role, this is really on a county, local level. This is what's happening in Travis County, but once people are in the state prison system, you guys don't really play a role much, right?
Well, integral care does not have staff housed in the state prison, that is true. But when people are leaving the state prison and coming back to the community, we offer them the same service opportunities and service arrays that we would any person leaving Del Valley Jail. And that can include going to any of our 3 integrated healthcare clinics. We have 2 slots on Mondays and Wednesdays at each of those clinics, and they're located north, south, and central, for people that have just recently gotten out of jail, because we want to get them provided with an intake and brought into services as quickly as possible. If people leave the jails and they need mental health services, but they need more immediate mental health services because it appears they could be in a mental health crisis, they have a couple options as well, whether they're coming out of state prison or coming out of Del Valley Jail. One of those options is to receive clinic-based psychiatric urgent care. And Integral Care has psychiatric emergency services on 1165 Airport that's open 7 days a week for people to walk in and get mental health crisis care from a team of therapists, case managers, nurses, and psychiatrists. Another option that jail staff have, including the staff Danny supervises, the counseling and education staff, in addition to the nursing, and this is also for central booking as well, they can actually dispatch one of Integral Care's mobile crisis outreach teams to come out to the jail when someone is releasing to provide an immediate crisis assessment and crisis intervention with up to 90 days of crisis services follow-up in the community. So to piggyback a bit off what Danny said earlier, the more quickly we can work with people that are re-entering the community, the better, especially in regards to the mental health needs, the housing needs, and the substance use needs. I would say that something our community could really invest in that could help with unnecessary incarcerations of people living with mental illness and substance use disorders is really scaling up substance use and mental health programs. A lot of people that engage in criminal activity, like Lauren Johnson was talking about for herself, it's very geared from substance use. It comes from a place of problems with substance use. And if we could prevent that by really beefing up and scaling up programs to treat people for substance use and mental illness, mental health crises, before they engage in criminal activity, I mean, to me, that would be the gold standard.
Well, I know Lauren Johnson was a guest here on Decibel, who is working now with the American Civil Liberties Union of Texas, but has been an advocate and lobbies for criminal justice reform. But one of the things I hear from just about everybody involved in the front lines of criminal justice reform is that very thing. It's like, let's not build more prisons, let's get them on the front end and make sure that we're helping these people before they turn to crime to feed their, addiction. I want to talk briefly about suicide because before we started rolling, you told me that the risk of suicide is greatest when people come out of prison.
Yeah.
Talk about that and how we tackle that issue.
Sure. So when people experience a mental health crisis, I mean, your worst case scenario is suicide. And we have a lot of crisis teams that work to mitigate that risk when it's brought to our attention. When someone leaves jail, they've just had an extremely disruptive event happen in their lives, a potentially traumatic event, and many definitions of the word traumatic. And when they leave jail, as your previous guests, Doug Smith and Lauren Johnson, spoke so eloquently about, there's all these ripple effects. It doesn't just end when they leave jail. They have to figure out where they're going to live, what type of job they can get, and a job that's purposeful, a job that has meaning and contributes to the community. That's very important to anyone, not just people leaving jail. So they have an enormous amount of what we would call psychosocial risk factors. And they also have this risk factor of being in a confined space that was potentially traumatic and very disruptive. They might have lost benefits while they were in jail. They might have lost their jobs while in jail. Many of the women in jail might have custody issues when they leave jail. All of these things create these confluence of risk factors for suicide. There was a really big study done a couple of years ago in regards to wealthy nations with high incarceration rates, of which the United States of America falls in that category. And what they found was the risk for suicide attempt and suicide completion went up exponentially within the first week of release from jail and remained high for 3 months. And lifetime, someone who's been in jail has a higher risk of dying from suicide than someone who's never been at jail. That's why it's really important at Integral Care, the programs we have that are specifically for people being released from jail, that we see them within 7 days of discharge, not just to get them linked as quickly as possible to a housing specialist, a supportive employment and education specialist, a psychiatrist, a therapist, but to assess them for that risk of suicide. And if we find that a risk of suicide is present, to immediately intervene and provide the treatment and supports that person needs to stay safe. And then once that crisis has been resolved, then we can really dig into the housing stuff and the job stuff and the substance use. But
that needs to be a priority.
It has to be. It has to be the priority.
And part of that is when a person comes into jail and we withdraw them from the substances, so their tolerance for the substances go down. So when they're released, if they start using again, then they miscalculate and may use more than they have in the past, which can cause an overdose. Or part of the substance use and suicide, when you get this linkage, is there's this subtle, I don't care if I die, I'm going to take a risk here, and I'm going to take this much more that I know is not safe for me, and it may kill me, it may not. It may not be a very active suicide attempt, but it's a passive suicide attempt. So the risk for anyone who's using substance use goes up even much higher.
My final question is misconceptions. What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about people who have been serving time or people who've formerly incarcerated folks? Would you like to dispel some of those myths?
Sure.
I think the biggest is that they cannot get a full life, a full productive life. They can't be contributing citizens. I hear this all the time. We need to be tough on crime. We need to punish people. We need to bring back labor camps and all that. And that's just not right. It's not the way that it should work. We do know when people get into treatment that they can turn their lives around. They can become successful. We've seen many examples of that. They just need the support and help. They come with a lot of history when they come to us from jail, and a lot of it could be coming from trauma in their childhood, how they were raised or not raised. Many of them come from the foster system, and they just need the skills and support to be able to make that change in their life, and they can do it.
I agree with Danny. I think a common misconception is that there really is no recovery from mental illness or substance use disorders or criminal behavior. And that's just not true. With proper treatment and support for all of those things, a person can not only recover and get symptoms to a level where they are maintaining their disorder, but thriving and being contributing members of society with their own unique gifts. The other, I don't know if it's really a myth to dispel, but an area of focus that I wish the community would pay a lot of attention to is the further upstream we can divert people from being unnecessarily incarcerated due to substance use or mental illness. That's what's better for not just the person living with the illness or the disorder, but it's really what's better for our community. And as much effort as can focus on, the upstream piece and keeping people from unnecessarily going to jail, that will really help with the reentry piece of people who do go to jail. So those would be the two things that I would like the community to know.
Great information, Laura Wilson-Slocum, Daniel Smith. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective on this very important piece of the reentry criminal justice puzzle, the one that deals with mental health. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching this afternoon.